political. They just lie. They cover their and they lie. I would have been very happy to have her on. And like I said, the goal was to release both of them the same day. They just got scared. They could have put her in. I would have held her hand. We would have had a conversation. I'm not going to be antagonistic. I'm not going to be I'm not going to be. I have no desire to turn this into a viral clip thing.
Kamala's audience squirms as she yaks about pachyderms. Our video of the day comes to us from the former VP who made her first major speech last night since Trump took office. And it was another classic ball of verbal vomit.
Kamala Harris appeared to believe she could glide through interviews using loose metaphors, nervous laughs, and quick deflections, until Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld stepped in with sharp humor and hard-edged facts. From tangled speeches to moments where she seemed to vanish when serious issues surfaced, they began peeling back the polished image layer by layer. This isn't just a roast for entertainment. It's a closer examination of leadership that sounds confident but often feels unclear. Thought Kamala was confusing before? Wait until the spotlight intensifies and the questions stop being soft. Buckle up, because this breakdown doesn't pull punches.
Favorite part was when Kamala Harris shows up, looks over and sees that Obama and Trump are talking to each other, and she goes like,
Yeah,
watch this. Look at her face.
off.
Look how angry she is, dude. Look how angry she is. It's unbelievable. Melania's like, I can't believe I have to be first lady once again.
First sit-down interview all by herself like a big girl. But when we talk about bringing down prices and making life affordable for people, what are one or two specific things she has in mind for that?
When we talk about bringing down prices and making life more affordable for people, what are one or two specific things you have in mind for that?
Well, I'll start with this. I grew up a middle-class kid. My mother raised my sister and me. I grew up in a neighborhood of folks who were...
The cracks show fast when a political persona leans too heavily on nervous laughter, sweeping slogans, and a habit of talking in circles that leaves audiences puzzled instead of informed. Kamala Harris, once promoted as the future face of female leadership, seemed to drift out of the spotlight with the awkward momentum of a shopping cart rattling on a broken wheel. There's an irony in how her career began in courtrooms as a prosecutor, only to later become the subject of criticism over the very justice system she once defended. Meanwhile, Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld entered the picture with pointed jokes, blunt commentary, and questions that landed like rhetorical sledgehammers.
Now that Joe's incapacitated, Cam gets celebrated. It's a master class in kissing some Cam ass. Video of the day comes to us from liberal media hacks who can't get enough of Kamala Harris since she became the Dems presidential Sharpton's like, please kill me. Sorry, Joe, the analogy doesn't quite work because unlike Rocky, Kamala can't blame her bizarre speeches on repeated blows to the head.
If you're enjoying this breakdown, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss more unfiltered commentary like this. Now let's talk about Kamala Harris and her well-known habit of assembling sentences that sometimes sound like IKEA instructions read aloud after a few margaritas. She didn't always sound like she was explaining policy. Often, it felt like she was looping around an idea without ever landing it. Try outlining one of her speeches, and you might find the sentences circling back on themselves instead of pushing the message forward.
There's an adage an historian once called a law of history. True of every society across the ages. The adage is, only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. I know many people feel like we are entering a dark time, but for the benefit of us all.
Joe Rogan joked that her reasoning at times felt like a software glitch running on too much caffeine. One moment she'd nod enthusiastically as applause rolled in without a clear point, and the next she'd explain the passage of time as if it were a groundbreaking discovery. It almost made you want to hand her a clock and a reassuring smile. The moment felt less like decisive leadership and more like a live philosophy lecture taught by someone whose knowledge came from a motivational quote on a coffee mug.
Saw that lady making fun of the guy selling her the champagne because he wasted his vote on Trump.
He asked me why I was getting the champagne, and I said, because I'm going to be toasting Madam President tonight. And I said, you do realize you wasted your vote, right? I walked out with my bottle of champagne.
She really believed it.
So, as you know, Kamala Harris did not win the election.
Greg Gutfeld, unsurprisingly, leaned all the way into the criticism. He joked about watching Kamala Harris bounce from topic to topic whenever serious questions appeared. Instead of direct answers, it often felt like she was performing inside a fog of political anxiety. When reporters asked about inflation, the responses sounded more like abstract storytelling than policy explanation. When foreign policy came up, answers drifted so far from the question that even she seemed to lose the thread halfway through.
Harris, when Tulsi Gabbard took her out of the hamstrings, that's a wrap, baby.
Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. She put over 1,500 people in jail for violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever...
Have you ever...
I didn't.
Okay.
She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of...
And then there was her role connected to the border. That wasn't satire, it actually happened. Harris was given responsibility related to border issues, yet critics frequently pointed out how rarely she appeared there. Joe Rogan joked it felt like putting a squirrel in charge of airport security. Technically present, but not exactly comforting. Greg Gutfeld highlighted the irony. Harris campaigned on transparency and progress, yet often stayed out of view when tough topics dominated headlines. Afghanistan, Ukraine, inflation, these issues exploded across the news cycle while her public presence seemed minimal. Critics joked she resurfaced mainly for ceremonies or speeches where climate change was explained through long metaphors that sounded poetic but light on detail. Gutfeld quipped that listening to those explanations felt like hearing astronomy described by someone guessing from memory. Confident tone, unclear substance.
A candidate that is the least liked vice president of all time, the least popular vice president of all time, and then use gaslighting and the full force of the media machine to turn her into the future and hope.
Right.
And then she's gonna be changed, even though she's the sitting vice president. And then on top of that, this idea of change when the Democrats have been in control for what, 12 of 16 years?
Right.
Which is crazy. Like, this is the change.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I view this election as a turning point, like a fork in the road of destiny that is incredible.
Greg Gutfeld especially enjoyed her speeches about electric vehicles. He repeatedly pointed out how Harris seemed unusually excited about electric school buses. Critics joked that while infrastructure and power grids demanded attention, the spotlight kept circling back to bright yellow buses, as if a smoother ride to school could fix everything. Gutfeld compared it to repainting the Titanic while it was still sinking. Then came her international trips. Visits to places like Poland and Germany struck critics as oddly casual. Nervous laughter, broad slogans, and moments some labeled awkward. Joe Rogan joked that watching her at a global summit felt like seeing a substitute teacher explain nuclear disarmament in the simplest possible terms. What surprised critics most was how she was continually framed as a strong leader while, in their view, sidestepping direct accountability, delegating heavily and stepping back when decisions turned controversial.
Hey, one nice thing about Kamala Harris?
I mean, she's there.
Yeah. Good job.
I mean, if this is Rocky, then it's Rocky 4, and Biden's Apollo, and Nancy Pelosi's the Russian that kills him. But like Donnie Douche, he said he's in love with her, and now his sex doll is very jealous.
Gutfeld joked that her leadership style amounted to governing by proximity, existing loudly near the president. Even members of her own party sometimes struggled to defend her privately, treating her like a walking PR challenge. Her poll numbers sank so low commentators joked they were tunneling alongside Joe Biden's approval ratings. Joe Rogan compared her support base to the Loch Ness Monster, frequently rumored, rarely proven. Her media appearances were unforgettable. Whether late night or daytime TV, Harris arrived ready to shine without actually saying much. It was like watching someone solve a math problem through interpretive dance. Gutfeld said her interviews were the political version of modern art. You weren't meant to understand them, just nod and move along.
I saw that video from a couple of weeks ago, the one of the elephants at the San Diego Zoo during the earthquake. And as soon as they felt the earth shaking beneath their feet, they got in a circle and stood next to each other to protect the most vulnerable. Think about it. What a powerful metaphor.
Yeah. It's almost like they built a wall.
Joe Rogan took aim at her debate performances, where she tried projecting toughness but often sounded like a tired HR manager delivering a mandatory training lecture. She clashed with rivals during the primaries, only to join them later with the enthusiasm of someone pretending to enjoy a bland vegan casserole. Her authenticity felt fleeting, and audiences noticed. Beyond confusing speeches and disappearing leadership moments, Harris became prime material for Rogan and Gutfeld because of how aggressively the media tried to sell her as brilliant. Every vague answer or awkward press moment was reframed as bold or strategic. Rogan compared it to selling decaf as rocket fuel. Gutfeld joked she had a reverse Midas touch. Anything she endorsed seemed to fall apart. A national tour meant to promote voting rights ended in viral confusion, leaving even supporters begging her to stop helping.
Like, wasn't she like a joke even among Democrats? Like 10 seconds ago? Like literally, like a day ago.
Yep.
And now it's like the country's rallying around.
I know.
Like,
yeah.
What? I don't know. I don't even.
Yeah, we're so easily manipulated, and they're all doing it in lockstep. Yeah, no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. She was, she polled as the least popular vice president of all time.
Yeah.
She is, I had dinner with a friend of mine recently who actually knows her. He says she's very smart.
Nothing was more ironic than her image as a justice reform champion while sidestepping questions about her own prosecutorial record like it was a surprise quiz. Harris, branded as a reformer, seemed to forget she once served as attorney general with a tough-on-crime history. Rogan didn't exaggerate. He simply laid out the record, and the contradiction spoke for itself. Then came the infamous bus ride moment, where she giggled through an economic speech as gas prices and inflation soared. Gutfeld joked it was like throwing a pizza party during a famine and calling it morale boosting. Her exit from office wasn't dramatic. It was a slow fade, moving with the urgency of an unplugged alarm clock. Yet even then, she kept trending thanks to awkward interviews, confusing speeches, and treating every camera like an improv stage. Rogan joked that if aliens landed and met Harris first, they'd assume Earth ran on giggles and inspirational nonsense and leave immediately.
The Avengers get together like, hey, are you trying to get me to hate superhero movies? You trying to show me your real weird personalities and get me to hate superhero movies?
Kamala forever. That's better.
Why are you doing that? If I was running the Avengers, I'd be like, hey guys, cut this shit. Do you think one person is going to vote for Kamala Harris because they saw that Iron Man wants them to vote for Kamala Harris? Are you
People were reminded that Harris was once presented as the heir apparent, the next big thing in leadership. So what did America get? Missed opportunities, verbal gymnastics, and a masterclass in saying a lot while saying nothing. Joe Rogan called her career an example of what happens when style outweighs substance and expectations collapse under their own weight. Harris wasn't a villain, more like a cameo in a story that desperately needed a lead. Some joked her greatest achievement was lowering the bar so far future leaders might need heavy machinery to find it. And her final press appearances didn't help. Greg Gutfeld said watching her reemerge felt like seeing a sitcom character wander into a serious drama. Awkward, out of place, and clearly attention-seeking. The setup never changed. Microphone, confused audience, and a metaphor about time.
Harris is the Democrat candidate for president of the United States. I'll give you a second to come to. The border czar who couldn't find our southern border on a map of Texas now wants to be America's commander-in-chief. Kamala couldn't lead a campfire sing-along, let alone the country's armed forces. But does that matter? Not to the media. Now, they would like this framed as a team sport battle, left versus right, Democrat versus Republican. But in reality, it's the media narrative machine.
And the roast doesn't stop here. As long as political ambition keeps getting confused with PR strategy and leaders believe vague slogans can run a country, there will always be another Kamala waiting in the wings. And Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld will be ready, armed with sarcasm and hot takes for the next episode of America's most unintentionally funny political sitcom. Harris didn't just fade from relevance. She practically tripped over her own teleprompter on the way out. Her political finale felt less like a mic drop and more like a fumbled relay handoff. No one was watching, and even her own party distanced themselves faster than a disastrous reply all email. Her legacy became a trail of nervous laughter, confusing metaphors, and policy promises that aged like unrefrigerated seafood.
Way that I could do it, and I even offered to do it late that night. So the night that Trump came on, I'm like, what if we do her, like when she's done in Texas, if she came here? But no one ever committed to doing it. This is like really important because they keep pretending that I lied or I did this or I did that. They never committed to doing it. Well, we went through, I've got a whole, we have all the receipts, by the way.
Of course.
I have a whole list of conversations.
Joe Rogan wrapped it up by saying her career proved that charisma without substance is just theater. And Harris wasn't Broadway. She was community improv night under a broken spotlight. Every policy speech felt like someone trying to solve algebra with finger puppets. And the audience clapped mostly because they weren't sure if she was finished or still buffering. Greg Gutfeld delivered his sharpest line. If Harris were a brand, she'd be the mystery flavor of a failed soda. Briefly hyped, quickly forgotten, and now a trivia question nobody wants to answer. Her story became a cautionary tale of overpromising and underdelivering, wrapped in nervous laughter and deflective slogans. In the end, Harris didn't redefine leadership. She redefined how low expectations could fall while still earning primetime coverage. A true masterclass in political airballing. And as she slips into the footnotes of history, one thing is certain. The next chapter in politics may be even harder to top for confusion disguised as confidence. And yes, the sequel is probably already on the way. And this brings us to the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, then hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next.